Is that recording? Yes, it is. Wow, I've done 2 of these videos now. 2 videos on YouTube. That's not my podcast. Bloody hell. I'm really getting into this thing, aren't I? So, this video is called Accidentally Growing an Audience. And I've put growing an audience in quotation marks, as I often enjoy doing in these kind of situations, because I hate all these kind of terms of growing your audience, writing content, providing value. I don't associate myself with any of those terms. And I want to talk a little bit about how I have accidentally grown an audience over this last year. The reason I'm talking about this is because I regularly write on Twitter whilst shitting on Twitter. It's one of my favorite activities to do, because people on Twitter, obviously, they love Twitter. And I like Twitter, but there's certain things about Twitter I don't like the reply guys, like the providing value guys, like the endless amounts of threads that are about nothing that you feel like you need to read. All of those things. There's what I hate about Twitter. So I wrote a tweet the other day that just said, I want to grow my Twitter audience. Ask yourself why. And if you don't know the answer, don't do it. Fairly straightforward tweet, maybe a little bit incendiary to some people. And a couple of people replied, and one of the answers stuck out. And this is the kind of answer I get a lot. This wasn't unique to this particular person. I get asked this kind of question a lot. And they said to me, why are you growing a Twitter and a podcast? Why are you growing those things? And I replied basically saying, I'm not growing either of them. On Twitter, the goal for me, if there is even such a thing, is to just turn up and write stuff. I am only on Twitter writing tweets because I enjoy it. And the same goes for the podcast. The only reason I do the podcast is because I enjoy it. And I enjoy having conversations with people. And the fact that I get to share those conversations with other people is just a privilege and a joy. That's the only reason. So the goal of these things isn't to grow them. There's no tactics going on whatsoever. It's just me sat at the end of a camera or the end of a mic, much like I am right now, or at the other end of a keyboard, just being me. There's never a tactic. There's never an ulterior motive to anything that I'm trying to do. So we find ourselves in a situation, or rather I do, probably not you. We find ourselves in a situation now where I have accidentally grown several Twitter audiences over this last year. I have gone from 400 to 600 followers or something on Twitter to 5,200 and something. And I've accidentally grown my Doodles account, my own obvious Twitter account, to over 3,000 followers from 0. And I've done similar things on Instagram. And my podcast gets, anywhere in the region of 50 to 150 downloads per episode. So I've accidentally grown all of these things without wanting to grow any of them. And that point right there really pisses a lot of people off, I've discovered. Because when I'm on there saying, I'm not growing an audience, I don't do it for you, I do it for me, they're trying to analyze the tactics that I'm doing, and they assume that my tactic of apparently not caring, of apparently genuinely doing this from the heart, it doesn't compute. It doesn't compute to a lot of these people, because they can't possibly understand why anybody would be doing it for fun. Which, maybe that's a problem with society. Something I am absolutely not going to get into in this. But, it raises an interesting philosophical point. So it really annoys them that I'm doing it purely because I want to. And that's a really important point, and probably the first proper one I want to make. I make all of these things because I want to and because I have to. See the previous video I made about being prolific. There isn't a desire to grow an audience. There is a desire for me to make things. And wherever that desire exists, I will continue to make things. And make things that are bad, make things that are good. I am always looking to destroy my audience, which is one of my favourite phrases I use on Twitter all the time. I'll probably make a video about that at some point. I'm always looking to reset myself, reset the content that I'm making, reset the art that I make, reset everything, change people's expectations of me to show all sides of me. And through doing that, I've accidentally grown some semblance of an audience. And it isn't that impressive. To take a year to go from 500 followers to 5,000 followers on Twitter is not impressive growth in anybody's eyes. None of these things are impressive, but they are weird to people when I talk about this and I say I'm not doing it to grow because they can't understand it. I've got the perfect case study of this. I recently decided to reset my audience and destroy my audience again by making the most inane podcast that you've probably ever heard. The podcast is called The Wednesday Audio. It gets released every Wednesday. The podcast is about Wednesdays. And right now I'm up to episode 7, I think. So I've made 7 of these inane podcasts. And this podcast was just another creative outlet for me. I knew that the podcast was going to be bad. I am literally sitting there for 10 minutes talking about Wednesdays when there isn't even things to talk about Wednesdays for within a couple of minutes. So I'm eking out a format that is absolutely terrible. And I regularly turn up to the podcast very annoyed with the fact that I can't find anything to say, but a small selection of people seem to enjoy it. And the way that the podcast works is it works on several levels. It's not to turn this too much into a media study here, but the podcast, the Wednesday Audio, is very meta. It's a podcast that talks about Wednesdays, that's released on Wednesdays, that is often about the fact that I can't find any content to talk about on a Wednesday, about Wednesday, on Wednesdays. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the podcast is meta. And each podcast I see as an episode of a TV show or a sitcom or something like that, where the plot and the character is developing. And I'm actually building the format of the podcast as I'm recording the podcast, literally podcasting in public. And I'm doing the whole thing not to grow it, not to grow an audience of any kind. I don't even know how many people are listening to every episode. I know 3 or 4 people tell me that they listen, so I'm guessing the audience is 3 or 4 big, but I'm not doing it for them. It is purely a creative outlet for me. I've got other podcasts where I talk to people. This is a solo podcast where I sit and you get to listen to me slowly descend into madness. Essentially, that's what the podcast is. Most people would never make content like that because they see it as content. They would never purposefully make something that they know people are not going to listen to. They'd never purposefully make content that would be challenging for them to make because they know nobody would listen to it. And most people can't handle the ego drive. Most people can't handle the fact that that will beat their ego down. But that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly why I do a lot of this stuff. And this comes into kind of an abundance versus a scarcity mindset. I look at all of these things like the podcast, the Wednesday podcast. It could stop tomorrow and I could make another podcast. It doesn't matter how many things I make. There's always more chance to make something else, to find other people to connect with who might enjoy the things I make. So everything I make is just a big pool of messing around with ideas and formats and content types, and purely just to challenge myself. And because I don't care who listens or watches or consumes, I famously don't delete my tweets on Twitter. I leave all the bad ones on there as well as the good ones. Because I do not care how many people look at anything that I do, it attracts people in a really weird kind of circus feature mentality, like I'm a zoo, like I'm in a zoo, or I'm an exhibit at a museum. People can't believe that there's this guy on the internet who genuinely doesn't want to build an audience, who constantly talks about the fact that he doesn't want to build an audience, but continues to accidentally build an audience. That is a concept a lot of people can't understand. But if you were to break this down into valuable points to take away, when you stop caring what other people think and you truly start to be yourself, people will find you. People will find you. People will enjoy what you say, make, visualize, draw, write, whatever. All the time you are attached to the idea of making something valuable for somebody, nobody will listen. We're surrounded by an abundance, an endless stream of valuable content, an endless stream of James Clear articles. Nobody else needs to write James Clear articles. Nobody else needs to write things for aliens to read. What we really need right now, and what we're desperately lacking with on the internet, is for people to turn up and just be themselves. To actually just do this. To just talk on a camera. To just sit like I am in my spare bedroom in my house and say what they think. This is what we're missing on the internet. And whenever you can work that out, you will, like me, accidentally build an audience. I promise you. I promise. Well, no, I don't promise you. Let's not make any rash statements, Craig. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it'll work for you.